who's with me so far? Alright, can you guys hear me? Alright, how about now, Kara? Obviously, I'm not very good with this, and I'm hearing a lot of feedback in my headphones on, so it's very difficult to try to talk. Alright, so I apologize if I'm choppy or anything like that. But what I was trying to say is, I know there's only five people watching, but if this helps you five, then that's good. And hopefully we can use this as a way just to kind of supplement what we've been talking about, and you don't necessarily feel like you're being left out to dry, and me just forcing you to do a bunch of work and just hoping for the best. Ultimately, you got to know this information, and I know a couple of times it's difficult in class to make sure that I answer every question. So maybe this will be an opportunity to do that. But I guess what I'm going to do is supplement everything that we have with those four ideas that were introduced somewhat today, whether it be in the creation of the Whig Party, to the Mexican-American War, to the idea of manifest destiny and the gold rush, to finally the abolitionist movement. And probably what you figured out through all this, maybe talking with your classmates or talking within your group, is that really and truly all these ideas somehow mesh. You're going to find in your research that there's, you can't really talk about, the success of the Whig Party without addressing, some of its presidential candidates in the late 1840s that actually had success in the Mexican-American War. But what I want to try to do tonight is to help you understand kind of how the Whig Party came to its fruition, and just understand that you can listen to this live stream and hear it from me, but there's 100 other resources out there as well that you can use that can give you just as much information, if not better information. You just always got to be looking forward and being able to decipher what's good information and what's not. But when we talked earlier today about the creation of the Whig Party, I tried to come to every group that had the Whig Party and just kind of make sure that at least the notes that you were taking were good. I know some groups just got an opportunity to organize what they were going to do, but the ones that I came around to, some of you guys did have already started your research. All right, and the main ideas that I want you to focus on with this is that the Whig Party was created in opposition to Andrew Jackson. If you go back and you look at what Andrew Jackson stood for, around the 1820s, and he's almost looked at as a dictator. There's a lot of people that are scared of him, that compare him to a king. He's pretty much going to veto everything that comes across his desk. He's not willing to work. He's kind of taken advantage of the presidential power, the executive power that's been given to him. And so that puts a lot of fear into a lot of the politicians in and around, D.C. And one of the main players in creating or the creation of the Whig Party is going to be an individual that it feels like we've been talking about, pretty much the majority of this class, and that's Henry Clay. Henry Clay is going to have his hands in, the Missouri Compromise. He's going to have his hands in the nullification crisis and creating that compromise tariff. And finally, he's had enough of what Jackson is standing for. Jackson's going to be involved in tearing down the national bank that was, Hamilton's idea. He's going to be responsible for, he's going to be pro-slavery. He's going to be responsible for the removal of Native Americans from their native lands. So there's going to be a lot of things that are going to be very harsh about Andrew Jackson. He's a tough individual, and Henry Clay is going to be he's going to be the exact opposite. Obviously, if he's in opposition to Jackson, and I guess historically, what Henry Clay is known for was with creation of the Whig Party is kind of his idea of the American system, which is, allowing America to expand and to be successful. The tariff that we would have talked about early on in 1828, he would have technically would have supported that because it was promoting individuals to buy American goods. And I'm sorry, Emma, I'm reading your question. No, this isn't specifically for 8th period. This is for anybody that wants it. Hopefully with 8th period, we can use this to kind of address some of the issues in there. But getting back to the American system with Henry Clay, I talked about he would have supported a tariff that would have promoted American industry or people to purchase goods within the United States. He would have promoted a national bank. He would have tried to, or he would have obviously opposed what Andrew Jackson was doing at this time. And then he would have also supported federal money being used to help farmers, or maybe something that we can understand, help transportation, roads, railroads, things like that, basically just for the entire economy of the United States to expand. So Henry Clay, Daniel Webster, these guys are going to be individuals that are going to associate themselves with this Whig Party, and then for about a 20-30 year period, you're going to have Whig influence in politics, but it's only going to be a short, like I said, 30-year period, because ultimately when we get to the Compromise of 1850, the Whig Party kind of dissolves and turns into what we know as the Republican Party. A very young Whig at this time from Illinois would have been President Lincoln. Okay, he's going to be associated with the Whig Party early on, and you're ultimately going to see the ideas of the Whig Party change into the Republican Party, but that's later on. So getting back to kind of the two ideas, and I'm looking at my notes while I'm talking to y'all, so I know I keep looking away from the screen. That's what I'm looking at right here. But the two main political parties that you're going to be having during this time post-Jackson, Andrew Jackson would have been a Democrat. He would have been known as a Jacksonian Democrat, and then the Whigs. All right. This is nothing that you can't find in your research about where the Whig name came from. It would have been people during the Revolutionary War period that would have called themselves Whigs, because if you trace it back to Britain, it would have been a political party that would have associated with opposition to the king. And because a lot of these Whig individuals, politicians in the United States, opposed Andrew Jackson and kind of addressed him as king, then it only made sense for them to create this Whig Party. Some things that they would have opposed would have been the expansion of the United States. And I know that kind of contradicts a little bit of what I talked about with the American system, but there's just so many different things that are going to come into play when we talk about the Mexican-American War and the idea of manifest destiny that some of the other groups will address and I'll address later on. And then obviously these Whigs would have opposed states' rights. So you're going to start to see during this time period a lot of anti-slavery politicians, a lot of abolitionists, politicians that would have aligned with the abolitionist views would now start leaning towards this Whig Party. You're also going to see too that the Whig Party was really associated with the money, or it would have been kind of a white-collar party is what I would describe it as. I'm sure other people would describe it as that as well. But then, you got to really think too that most people that had money were involved somehow in politics at this time. It just so happened that the ideas of the Whig Party kind of appealed to a white-collar type individual. So as you keep looking at what the Whig Party is and what it stands for, it's interesting to look at the presidential line that we're going to address from Andrew Jackson ultimately to James Polk, who will be more for the groups that's talking about the Mexican-American War, because he's not going to come into play until around 1840, somewhere around in there. But the line of presidents during this time is Andrew Jackson, Martin Van Buren, William Henry Harrison, John Tyler, and ultimately James K. Polk. All right, and Andrew Jackson and Martin Van Buren are going to be Democrats. So ultimately, it wasn't until, and I got to go back and check on this, but Van Buren obviously was after Jackson. Harrison was the 9th president. He came into play in 1841. So technically, the Whigs did not get the White House. Let's see, for about 7 years until after their party was formed. They had to gain some popularity, and they had to gain some trust when they first ran. And let's see, I think when Andrew Jackson ran a second time. Yeah, when he ran a second time in 1832, he defeated Henry Clay, which would have been the first Whig candidate for president, and he destroyed him. I'm looking at the stats right now from this president website, and Andrew Jackson would have had 219 electoral votes to Henry Clay's 49. So it's not until 9 years after that presidential election that you see the Whigs get the White House, and obviously the first one would have been when William Henry Harrison. A lot of you guys probably know Mr. Harrison. I can't remember who I was talking about in class, but they mentioned Tippecanoe, and basically around 1811 or anything like that, William Harrison would have had he would have been like a general, or he would have been an individual that had success in kind of removing Native Americans from their land, which is kind of contradictory to what the Whigs would stand for, because if Andrew Jackson was for Native American removal, and your first Whig president is somebody that actually fought to remove Native Americans, it's kind of a contradiction. But Harrison becomes the first Whig president, and his story is interesting because he gives like the longest inaugural address, in presidential history. It lasts over 2 hours, or around 2 hours, and then the rumor is that it was a super cold day or whatever, and he contracts pneumonia during this, and he's only president for a month, and he ultimately dies, a month after he's inaugurated. And so what's interesting is that his vice president would have been John Tyler, who would have been a Whig just by identification, but mainly he was placed there to get the Southern votes. And ultimately, when he becomes president, everything that the Whigs were trying to do, Tyler just ends up denying it, pretty much vetoing any kind of Whig legislation that would have got to his desk. And he ultimately just, like I said, denies the Whig name, to the point where they end up kicking him out of the Whig Party. It's an interesting story. You can go and look at all this stuff and read about it. But it's just an interesting idea, or an interesting concept, that this political party comes to creation in opposition of Andrew Jackson, and has a 20 to 30 year window where they're a legitimate force in American politics, and then ultimately they kind of dissolve or become eliminated, around the 1850s. So the idea that I want you to focus on in your projects is to kind of look at this idea as why the idea of the Whig Party, or how the Whig Party ended up having its hand in. I have to apologize here because I'm stumbling over how I want to ask this, but how they politically made moves to influence the government as far as anti-slavery ideas, or the idea of the country not expanding to maybe democratic ideas, is what we're going to see with Polk. The whole idea of manifest destiny, where Polk's going to justify going to war with Mexico to gain land that's under Mexican control, to expand the country, to have opportunities maybe to expand the Southern Empire out west. There's going to be a lot of greed and a lot of just confusion in these political ideas, because remember, we're only we're not even to 100 years of being a country yet. So, like I said, that's some of the ideas to help you get started with the idea of the Whig Party or the creation of the Whig Party. Obviously, it's not everything that can be added to your project. There's obviously a lot more that you can look into. I know there's only 5 people watching, but do any of you guys have a question or anything that you found that you want me to try to explain a little bit more or give you some ideas as to how it kind of applies to this time period in history? I love the fact Luke's in this class or in this live stream, and no, I'm not watching any soap cutting videos at this time. Don't be afraid to find different videos or PowerPoints or websites that other people have created to kind of help you understand this idea. The more you read, the more you watch a video or somehow engage in the conversation is going to help you understand this idea. No. Okay, so Emma, the Whig Party, the Mexican-American War is going to be, what, 1846? The Whig Party would have been in existence, like I think I said 1834, or around that time. I mean, Henry Clay would have ran against Jackson, but he might not have ran as a Whig in 1832, but the idea of the Whig Party was starting to be founded. Let me look up the exact date of when the Whig Party was founded. (1833). 1834. I really don't have an exact. One website says 1833, another one says 1844. So let's just say somewhere between 33 and 34, the Whig Party was created, and that would have been after Jackson's second term. So the Whig Party ideas were way before the Mexican-American War, but how the Whigs tie into the Mexican-American War is that Whigs would not have supported going to war to expand the country. They would have, they are fearful of the idea of slavery spreading, but they're also, let's see, I can say this. They're kind of that strict constitutionalist, right? Where they would have said, that there's nothing within the Constitution about going to war and expanding the country. So they would have been fearful of that. And I'm sure there's a lot better ideas that can come around with that too. We may just have to research and find that. Hello, Allie. How are y'all? I'm assuming that you and Owen are having a nice date night watching a 36-year-old man talk about American history. You guys need to find better date nights. All right. We're going to talk about this in class. I had a student come to me today, and the past 2 to 3 weeks, I've tried to go away from just lecturing in class and having you take notes to actually getting you involved in kind of doing your own research and creating some type of product, whether it be a movie poster, which by the way, that I love that activity. I thought I got great. I haven't graded them, and that's because maybe I'm just swamped right now with other things. But the movie posters that I got were great, and I feel like most of those ideas helped you kind of understand the nullification crisis. And then I think a lot of you guys have been programmed, or you've had crash course videos shoved down your mind ever since you've been at Signal Mountain. And I like the videos. I really do. I think John Green does a good job. But why can't you be great? Why can't you create something that's your own, that helps you talk about these ideas and helps you better understand them? So I think a lot of misconception too with this activity was that it had to go along the same format as a crash course video, and that's not the case. I'm just asking you to get a lot of information discussed in 5 to 7 minutes, so we can move on and try our best to get to the most interesting stuff, which is happening around 1850 and 1860 with the beginning of the Civil War. All right. It's amazing when you get on here and just chat, and 30 minutes is gone by. I think we'll just build on these. Yeah, I guess getting back to what I was trying to say too is like I'm trying to just have something to supplement the class, because I'll be honest with you guys, it's taxing to just stand up and lecture an entire period, and I know that some of you guys may feel that you're not getting the information. So this is just kind of my safety blanket to make sure that you're having the opportunity to get this information. Know too that I've just briefly described the creation of the Whig Party. There's going to be more ideas coming to it, and if there's also a supplement reading that you can read off of the Battle Cry Freedom book that I have in my classroom. I found a PDF form of that book as well. It's a long read. It's about 20 or 30 pages worth, but it really ties in together the Whig Party and its involvement with the Mexican-American War, and moving forward to what the country is going to do with all the new territory that it's acquired from the Mexican-American War. So if you want to stop by and talk to me or remind me tomorrow, I'll try to get that reading to you, or at least show you where you can read it. Any other questions before I get off of this wonderful, wonderful, wonderful live chat? I'm not cutting soap, I'm not drinking anything, so I'll take one off-the-wall question to answer it, and then I'll get off. Yes, my plan, Emma, Lord willing, and if I've got time, obviously I won't be doing one tomorrow, but I think I'm just going to do this as much as I can, just so I have other ideas or other, I guess I want to use it as reinforcement. I don't want it to be the main form of teaching, but I do want it to be a way to reinforce what we've learned in class. I know I won't be doing one tomorrow because we have a middle school football game. Thursday I won't be doing one. I'll try to send out a remind to everyone before I go on, and then obviously they'll always be. You can always go back and watch them. After that, favorite movie is Forrest Gump. A close second though is The Departed. Luke, I hate to admit this, man. I hadn't seen the halftime show. The only time I've had an opportunity, I had to get Elena to bed, so we only stayed for the first half of the Red Bank game. I'm hoping that I can come this Friday and stay and actually see the entire game. All right, guys. Look, do me a favor and just, when you get off this, look at another video of the wigs. It's going to say the exact same things that I said, maybe even said it better to where you can understand it. But don't be afraid to use other resources and help you understand these concepts. I hope you have a good night, and I'll see you bright and early in the morning.